Hello, this is Joshua for Frost Dragon Designs, and today I'd like to talk to you about my Undead Druid for Black Cat RPG Series 5, the Lichgate. Now let's get into the design. The Undead Druid was one of the earlier designs that I created for this project. It was created, obviously back in the phase where I didn't know that I was doing the living versions. But it didn't even have the benefit of being one of the later undead ones that I created. This was maybe like the second or third design that I worked on. And so there was a lot of figuring out what in the world I was trying to do with this project, what the concept really was. So this design changed a lot from like my initial sketches to, what the final pin design is. I started out with this kind of skeletal figure with moose antler type horns. And I thought, well, maybe it's like a Grim Reaper, like a Forest Reaper kind of character. So I gave it like it's this giant two-handed sickle or scythe. That didn't really make sense if you think about it, like a Forest Reaper. Like you can't reap trees. Anyway, so then I was like, well, maybe a one-handed sickle and like a spirit companion. And I went with a bear because... well, I really like bears, and I had already designed a bear for a previous druid cat pin, and I was just like, well, maybe I can use that as a starting point for the bear. So I grabbed that bear and turned it blue to imply that it's a spirit, not a real bear. And I started to get something like really cool looking, I think, but it felt too wide, which is hilarious now, seeing the end project and how big some of those pins ended up. It's just hilarious to me that I was concerned about how wide it was when it was that version with just the spirit bear. I mean, honestly, pin size is something I struggle with. The bigger the pin is, the more expensive it is to produce. But also, it seems that the longer I'm in pin making mode, the bigger my pins are getting. If you compare my pins from Series 5 to Series 1, there's just a huge difference between the size of those pins. I mean, in Series 1, several of the pins were like 1.2 inches at most. Whereas, now I'm pushing, some of these are like practically 3 inches for the non-big pins. And I mean, we're getting bigger for like the dragons and stuff. Anyway, you can see that I tried doing a skeletal bear with like spirit around it, kind of like I ended up doing with a lot of the kitties for this series, the undead kitties. But it really wasn't working for me visually, like emotionally, whatever. Like when I look at it, I didn't get like the, yeah, this is the correct way to go feeling. I think that may have been different if I had tackled this design later in the project, but since it was early on in the project, I guess I didn't really have a feel for what I was looking for. So I just kind of kept searching around for what felt right for this particular pin design. So I just kind of landed back on this idea of a druid with a wooden shield and a single-handed weapon. I don't really know what it is with me and druids with shields and single-handed weapons. The original plan for the Series 1 druid was like that, but some friends convinced me to go with a staff instead. Series 2 was a female druid with a staff. Series 3, I went back to that idea, and I had my mushroom druid, and he had a cudgel and a wooden shield. That was fun. Series 4 doesn't really count for these purposes because it was all based on astrology, but, Series 5, here I am back with a druid with a wooden shield. I just like the way it looks, I guess. So, the next struggle that I had with this particular design was the color scheming, as well as just the general look and feel of the aura energy around him. I was pretty convinced that I had settled on these yellow colors for the aura. I don't know why. I mean, I look at it now and I'm not really that into it. But this was before I knew I was doing the living versions as well. And then, of course, the living version ended up being warm tones. So I guess what I ended up doing with this one was kind of dull, husky kind of colors. Like the living version of this druid represents, I guess, autumn color schemes, whereas this one, those autumn colors have faded into browns and grays, and we are in winter, is kind of the look and feel I was going with the final color scheme for this pin design. And in the end, he ended up not being a melee combatant. I swapped out that sickle for kind of like a chunky wand. I kind of envision him as a spellcaster now. So this one had a pretty big change and evolution as I was working on it. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching me design this pin. I hope you enjoyed hearing a little bit about my thought process that I had while working on it. If you did, go ahead, like and subscribe. I try to release 1 to 2 new videos a week if I can, and I would love to have you along for the next one. So thank you again so much for your time, and have a great rest of your day.